Hey there, rulers. Welcome back to the Tournament Report with yours truly, Paul Reisman. Today we are taking a look at the recent Caseyville GP this previous week. Let's dig right in.
This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, TCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for product, and FOWlibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists. It's also brought to you by our guest lecturer patrons, Vite Ramen. Class is in session.
Alright guys, you're going to see me moving around the screen here a little bit just because of my technical limitations that I've been sort of given by the fates, but we're going to be doing this a little bit of an old school style. So the top, we had 36 players at Caseyville in Illinois this past week. We are looking at just over 25% of that, about 9 decks. We're playing the SKL Machina Emperor, the Machine Emperor sort of list. I mean, this deck has just sort of come out of nowhere, and so people have kind of latched onto that ever since Magdeburg. We also had the Aristella list, which is again another combo list that is utilizing Warhorse and Charge at the Fairy Tale King. We had a ton of Wolfgang decks. Wolfgang 2 with the Demonic Worlds really made a showing here, and then we had a ton of other decks that made it, including Mika, which did not do very well, very unsurprising to me. But we also had Zeus, Falchion, and Vega just making up about 5% of the overall pool, and then we had 22% of other decks being represented, maybe just like one-ofs, but overall did not top, so they are in the other category. All that being said, we did have contract rulers, so this is the ruler breakdown for the Moon Children. As you can see, Light Moon Child was highly represented, and I attribute that mostly to being used as an anti-combo tool. So with things like Warhorse that are being put onto the Jace, they are being played for free, so they are still being put on the Jace and are counted for being played. So they actually add to Light Moon Child's quota for being able to activate and stop your opponent from doing anything. So of course, this is a very popular choice. You're going to need to judge when to use this card, obviously, but its God's Art is very useful in a combo-based meta. And unsurprisingly, Fire Moon Child is next because things cannot be canceled with Fire Moon Child, which is very advantageous for a lot of decks. And then Darkness Moon Child is there to just pop something for free, which is really useful. Darkness Moon Child especially gets a lot of play in the top 8 sideboard decks, which are really nice for if you have a need to just have a free pop to stop your opponent from winning the game. Darkness Moon Child is there for that. We're also going to see some Wind Moon Child play, not just in the sideboard, but we actually have a couple of decks playing them in the main board, which I thought was very interesting. And then Water Moon Child exists, but it's not in the top 8, so we're not going to talk about that too much. This is your top 8 breakdown, and of course, if you already saw this, you saw it on our our Ruler School Facebook page for Force of Will. That is going to be linked down in the description down below. So if you're not a part of that already, be sure to follow us. We try and get these different ruler breakdowns up for you as quickly as possible over there. So if you're not someone who watches the tournament report but still wants that kind of news, this is a good place to find it. Of course, we have 3 Machina lists making it into the top cut. That's about a 1 to 3 ratio for conversion. That's really good. Falchion, also really good conversion rates there, as well as Vega. And then of the very few Wolfgang 2 decks that actually made it in, we had 2 in the top 8 for the first time probably ever. And then Zeus, surprisingly, only 1, which is one of our Michigan people, made it into the top 8 again with Zeus. But the fact that Zeus only has 1 deck represented kind of illustrates either what people are thinking about in this metagame here in the United States, especially in the Midwest, but it also kind of illustrates the power of Machina and its overall potential to just be a very strong deck overall. So with all of that being said, let's get into the top 8 lists, and we'll look at Brendan Hill's top 8 cut. And once again, thanks again to I Spy for compiling these lists. However, I'm going to be making some additions because there are some notable changes that they've made into the visual deck list here that are different from the left side. All of these, of course, are going to be up on our Facebook page, so check those out as well if you want to get a closer look at these deck lists as we go over them. But Brendan Hill, of course, taking the top spot with SKL Machina. What world is this where SKL Machina is actually topping? I haven't seen this ruler do anything for so long. I was messing around with this ruler a long time ago, just trying to do some combo shenanigans, and it wasn't very good. But if you get Warhorse and Prototype and a Typhon's Cluster and some other 0 cost or 1 cost non-attributed card, suddenly this ruler is really, really strong. So let's check this out. So of course, the main combo of the deck is you search for a Prototype, and then you get a free Warhorse as a result. If you have something on the field already, like an Engineer of Eternal, you're able to just get a lot of value off of the swiftness there. Plus, your Warhorse, when it dies, gives you 10 life, which is really nice. So what you're going to be seeing in this list, in particular, is that the light cradle here is actually not light cradle, it is selective decapitation. Selective decapitation is when something dies, you foresee, and then you can sacrifice 2 resonators to draw a card, which is really nice. So if you're sacrificing your horses or your Togasas or your prototypes, you're actually getting additional cards and seeing additional things as they die. Plus Warhorse gives you an additional 10 life, which is really helpful. Just makes you a lot less squishy in terms of how the game goes. Origin in this case is facilitating basically what is a toolbox in your side deck. So you're able to reveal your Einsberg, steal your opponent's additions. If they're playing Regalia, I mean, they're playing Regalia, so you get to steal that too if you wish to. But basically you're playing this to steal additions. So things like the opponent's institutes, for instance, is a really good way of utilizing this card. This particular deck does not run Institute, which is very, very interesting. Instead, it's opting to run Gradius and a couple of Togasa, as well as Sprinting Steward, in order to just pretty much aggro your opponent out of the game. And I would imagine the win con is letting your opponent set up their board and you just steal it with Einsberg. You also have Drywing, which again is a really powerful card, even in this format. Powerful, but I don't personally think it's overpowered. I think it does a lot of work to prevent your opponent from getting a little too far ahead in their will production. But with Origins, it's a really good combination. You have Mechanized Children of Kronos as well, but you also have your gears in the sideboard as well. So you have an additional 800 burn damage with the Dragon of Solari, you have an additional draw with the Shark, and then with Bird, you also get an additional 1k in life, which is really helpful. One thing that Brendan can do is if he doesn't want to run Typhon's Cluster games 2 or 3, you can side it out for Outer Space, which makes it more difficult for your opponent to do Judgment. Or to do Order, which is really helpful against Zeus. You can search it out of the deck for 1 because it's an addition, just coincidentally. One thing I also want to talk about is the Magic Stone deck here. So the Magic Stone deck in particular is opting to not play Ebon Home, right? It's opting to just do Scorched Bales and then a couple of Purgatory Stones. And this is to prevent your opponent from advancing in their Union 7. That whole thing against Zeus is enough of a reason to not run Ebon Home right now. At locals, you're probably going to be fine, but of course, Ebon Home giving your opponent even a little bit of an edge feels real bad. So you don't want to do that, of course. I also am a big fan of the 2 Togasa. It helps you with your selective decapitation, sets up those plays for you to be able to foresee and draw. Togasa is just like a generic Percival for any deck. Although you get to see a few less cards, it's slottable into literally anything. So this deck is really interesting. It's sort of like I'm going to play with the assumption that my opponent is also playing Machinalist, so it kind of shows you what people were expecting as they were heading into this metagame. Brendan, obviously winning the tournament, had a really good meta prediction, not running his own institutes, but stealing his opponents, which feels like a really good tempo grab. So congratulations to Brendan for getting first place. And as we move on here, I'm going to be talking about some of the anti-combo cards that Brendan is also playing, but a lot of other decks are also playing these cards. Next up, we have Toby Gaffney, friend of the channel, once again. That being said, we have a lot of friends who make it into top 8, so... so Toby Gaffney, congratulations for getting into top 2. He was playing the only Falchion list that cracked into the top 8, and I think it might have been the only Falchion deck in the actual tournament as well. So Toby is one of the rare people who are actually mainboarding the Wind Moonchild, and I think this is mostly to stop your opponent from having sprinting stewards, or even against opposing Falchion lists who wanted to use daily research. Daily research is really strong in this list because for free you essentially get to tutor any addition out of your deck. So you can see here he has Trishula, he has Institute, he has Belial's Castle for a little bit of additional damage prevention. He has 2 Origins, which you can also search out of the deck. One of the cards that, actually 2 of the cards that you can't necessarily see all that well in this list because they're incorrect, is Barrier of Shadows. That's going to be the top left card in the main deck here. Neo Barrier of Shadows would have also been a decent card, I suppose, but I think Barrier of Shadows in particular, being a 1-drop black, is much better. Makes God's Arts more expensive, makes Judgment more expensive. But he's also playing Schrödinger, which is not the parallel world Schrödinger, but the edition, the black-white edition that either blanks a Resonator or a Regalia on entry. That's pretty much the only effect that is relevant in this particular list. But you notice he's also running Mikey. What I'm not sure of is whether or not the Infinite with Mikey and Schrödinger actually came into play for him, but it is an option. Which I think is, again, 2 card combinations. Whether or not your opponent can interact with it is kind of a secondary concern for me. If you're able to sort of bring out just multiple Mikeys, or even if you're able to bring out Mikey multiple times using Schrödinger, blinking it, and getting all of these different Schrödinger clones onto the field, all of a sudden your Mikey is a win condition. So I think it is something you need to keep an eye on, and of course you can search it out of the deck with daily research. But just be aware that that is very much a win condition. Is it flimsy? That's up for debate. I know Jeremy does not think that that is a very potent win condition. I personally think it is, because there's a lot you can do with that if your opponent allows you to get there. So that's up for debate. But again, I don't know if Toby actually got that Infinite off. Otherwise, he has other cards that are super helpful for that reason as well. Fiery Angel of Vengeance. Being able to pay some life and search out another copy triggers your Warhorse. He's playing a couple of copies of that. He's also playing One Never End, which is something you can bring out with your Awakening of Feathsing. Feathsing also triggers the Warhorse effect, so you can get that for free. He's opting to play Institute with 2 other rulers you can tap to remove your opponent's graveyard. I don't see why not. He's also playing a Diversity Stone list, so he's able to get a pretty massive board there, which is really, really helpful. He's playing Prototypes and Sealed One-Eyed Dragons. I feel like these cards are not necessarily staples, but highly favored in this format. Because he's playing Falchion and a ton of other additions, he gets to play Feathsing. He has 1 Healing Robot for just general life recursion, which is, you know, pretty decent. If your opponent decides to remove your graveyard with their Institute, you get some free life gain. And then, of course, you have Engineer of Eternal, a 7/7 free body that can come out. You're playing a ton of additions, so this card is just a free 7/7 that can draw you a card if you have multiple additions on the field already, but it also allows you to put those additions that are going to die that turn back into your hand. So that's really helpful as well. The sideboard is basically, again, a toolbox. He's playing 1 Delorias, which I think is, I'm just a huge fan of that in general. He's opting to run his Cocoon as the Great Wall, which in combination with First Moon means that you never take damage, but you also get an additional draw and barrier on your side of things. Lightning Cave, also really good card. You can search it out with daily research. Makes your opponent's warhorses essentially, you know, you get a free 4/4, but nothing is going to be getting swiftness, essentially, unless it's a blue card, right? And then he's playing 3 Heavenly Gust for the mirror match. I think this card is really good, especially if Falchion gets more playability, but it's also really good because we're seeing addition control style, addition combo decks really starting to come out of the woodwork due to Machina and due to Warhorse and such. Additions just get a lot of value right now. Heavenly Gust, really strong card in general. Congratulations to Toby for getting 2nd place. Really happy to see Falchion get so far in this tournament. And next we have our invitee, Tyler Tompkins. Tyler is a Michigan native, and so seeing him get into the top cut and finally get his invite. Toby and Brendan already had their invites, I guess. So Tyler got one of his invites. I might have been just full of crap by saying that. So let me know down in the comments section if I'm just full of it. But either way, Tyler gets an invite. He's playing what has been a theory craft on the channel for quite some time. Behind the scenes, our team has been talking about what can Wolfgang 2 do in an environment where you have things like Warhorse available to us, things like Falling Through the Cracks of Time as an option. What can you really do with this list? And what we came up with is something similar to this. Falling Through the Cracks of Time we thought was a really strong card for a 1-drop answer to Warhorse plays. But then in general, Wolfgang has access to Terminus turn 3. Now that he has Warhorse, he can do that turn 2. He has Mariabella to make his effects cheaper. He also has Origins to make his effects cheaper and prevent your opponent from cheating Will, which is really helpful for him, slows the game down a bit. And so what you're going to find is essentially something that looks like this. So the package right now looks like it's 1 Warhorse, 2 Fiery Angel of the Chasm to give your Terminus swiftness and barrier, but if that's the safer play. Otherwise you can turn to Warhorse for the win, which is really helpful. Jewel is really good right now. It was good initially because we had things like Belial's God's Arts and things like that running around in the metagame. Now we just have more God's Arts, so this card just got a lot more potent, a lot more helpful. So Wolfgang kind of naturally moves into this addition control, addition combo environment, because he was the original addition control ruler from ADW. So this is definitely his environment. He also got a sealed one-eyed dragon, so he can see additional cards, but he can also get rid of your opponent's opposing black witches, of which Tyler is playing 4 of his own. He's also playing a removal in the form of Lumia, which is really helpful. It gives you an additional card, resets your life, which is really helpful, and then your natural Necronomicon barrier, preventing your opponent's stuff from triggering their own effects on their turn, because it's quick cast, is really helpful. In general, this deck is very interesting right now. It actually finally cracked into the top 8, not just once but twice. We'll be taking a look at that a little bit later in the video, but this is very much a ruler school theory craft that finally finally got us into the top 8, which is really great. So congratulations to Tyler again. Odyssey Games' own Tyler Tompkins, congratulations for getting 3rd place and your invite, buddy. Let's move on to top 4. So we're looking at the only Vega list that got into the top 8. Again, I think this is the only Vega list that entered, but this is one of my favorite decks of this new set as well. So it definitely goes for Falchion and then into Vega. Of course, this is the only contract level deck that has gotten into the top 8 thus far. You're going to be seeing the contract for Berserker just there on the 2nd line of the main deck. Let's talk about Vega for a little bit. So Vega has a lot of OTK potential just due to the nature of fire decks and some of the support that they have gotten, but also the tools that Vega naturally had going into this metagame with things like Inferno, Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, Sprinting Steward for free, the fact that Berserker will always deal 800 damage to your opponent unless they can somehow kill it. I think the reason this deck did so well is because Black Moonchild in particular was sided a lot of the time. It was never really main decked. People opted in a combo format to be playing something like Light Moonchild, right? So Light Moonchild being able to stop combo decks, really strong. Vega just gets to take advantage of that, of course. So what you're having in the deck is a little bit of a correction here right off the bat. We are not seeing that random Faria support card. It is Last Sacred Sword. Last Sacred Sword banish everything for to make the cost free, except for the one entity you don't want to banish, and then you just deal 10 to your opponent. It's a really good game-ending card, a really good win condition for the deck as well. Steven is also opting to play Swordmaster of Exploding Flame from Prologue of Ataraxia. This card is so interesting because its attack and defense are 3,000 minus your life. And this deck is all about losing your life, right? So in order to make your contract Berserker. So things like Dante Enters the Game of Gods is really helpful for that. The fact that Sealed One-Eyed Dragon makes you lose 6 life. Null Magic Stone in the sideboard. This guy is going to get real big real quick. On top of that, you also have Sylvia's Exploding Flame. You get a lot of benefits from that card. It's multimodal, so there's a lot of different ways you can utilize that card for the sake of winning the game. Also, dealing some damage is also really nice. Dante Enters the Game of Gods, in my opinion, is a staple card in this list. Minus 15, draw 3 cards, or just get a bunch of simple skills and +4. Cards is frankly just amazing. Steam is also opting to run Dodgy, which is kind of like a quick cast Guinevere if you want to get additional cards into your hand. It also dumps your Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, so if you end up losing life in any way, you just have a free 7/7 with Swiftness, Precision. I think it has Bane. It's definitely not flying, even though it has wings. It can just swing in and deal an additional 7 damage, which is really helpful. Decay of the Machines, probably another really important card to maintain in this metagame, mostly because Drywing stops you from getting the full benefits of your contract. The contract produces 2 additional will and draws you a card before contracting. So sometimes you can use that floating will to do additional effects like play your Inferno. Sprinting Steward, Inferno, and the contract is also an OTK. So basically you contract after paying a bunch of life with your Sprinting Steward. Obviously you can make Sprinting Steward on turn 2. You can use Sprinting Steward for free with Vega, pay down your life to like 800 or something, get a massive buff to your board, play your contract, use the additional will that's floated off of that to use Inferno, set your opponent's life down to your life, and then swing in for game with Berserker. That combo is very potent, and there are other ways for you to get into game range with other cards in this deck, but that is very, very potent. I also think Inferno is just super good in this list. As a late game card, as an early game card, it's useful throughout the game. Prototype is there. It's an upstart goblin if you're from Yu-Gi-Oh! Otherwise, it's just a pay nothing, get free card. Very good card in general. One cool card that Steven is using here that we have not seen in a very, very long time, ever since the days of New Valhalla, is the Magic Stone of Dueling. This is an Isis card that produces 2 Fire Will for activated abilities on your J Ruler. Happens to be that Berserker has a pay red, recover this card effect. So for 1 tap of this, you get to recover twice, plus any of the will you generate off of your contract. The sideboard is really interesting as well. Again, he's running the green Moonchild in the sideboard, which again I think is just to stop mastery effects, and the black Moonchild as well. Darkness Moonchild is there to just pop any card that is going to be dealing some serious damage to you. His Cocoons, I'm interested in why he's not playing the Arena expansion for Vega. Instead, he's opting to play Solari and the Great Wall. Great Wall kind of makes sense to me. In an aggro deck, you're getting an additional draw, plus your opponent can't interact with as a player, they can't interact with you, which is kind of nice. But the fact that he's running that instead of the card that buffs your field, I think that's really interesting personally. Also turns off all your opponent's war horses and their bird in the sideboard, so the fact that he's not running that I think is really really interesting. I'd love to know more about that. If you're watching this video, let me know down in the comments, but I'm interested in why you ran that over another card. I think Truck is also just I think it's just a joke, which is also back in Tyler's list. The Freyless Devotee is also just a just a joke card, just kind of like a dare. So I think Truck, I think it's the same. I don't think it actually provides anything to the deck, but I also don't know what Truck does, so I could be totally wrong. Either way, can't say too much because Steven got 4th place. Congratulations, buddy, for getting 4th place. We're moving on to Dustin Jones, who was the other Wolfgang who made it into the top cut. He's opting to play a few different demonic worlds, which, you know, at the end of the day are not, you know, super relevant. You can play Temple of the Dead to just swarm the field. That's an option. You can play Permafrost if you want your opponent to have less things. Like, for instance, if your opponent played Berserker, all of a sudden you can just freeze their Berserker forever, which is kind of nice, unless they recover it. Never mind. Don't listen to me. One thing that Dustin is doing in this deck that's a little bit different than Tyler's, he's opting to run Lorites, and he's also opting to run Lucifers, which are fallen angels that can help swarm the field from Paradise, which is really helpful. He's also playing the First Layer to do a little bit of additional damage alongside life gain, but he's also opting to play Angelic Battle Barrier. This is one of the most important cards you're seeing in all of these lists because it's a really good anti-combo card. Whereas Tyler opted to play Falling Through the Cracks of Time to just really mess with your opponent. Angelic Battle Barrier just stops their turn cold, so they're able to just kind of set up, and at some point they can just be told, no, you don't get to play any more cards this turn. I think you can go either way. I think both Falling Through the Cracks of Time and Angelic Battle Barrier are cards that are really good in this combo environment, especially with Horse. But Dustin's list is definitely more green. He's running things, again, like Lorite. He's also running Girion. He's only opting to run 3 of the Necronomicon Barrier, but he's also running, again, that same ratio of 2 Fiery Angel of the Chasm and the Warhorse. That combo means that you can always get your Terminus on turn 2 if you need it, but you can also just run a little bit slower if you're, you know, in an environment where it feels like your Terminus is just going to die to removal. If your opponent is playing Black Moonchild, for instance, that could be relevant, right? So Fire Angel of the Chasm with Terminus, just swing in 1 turn later. It's safe, basically. He's also running 1 Jewel, which I think is totally fine. I don't necessarily see myself running 2 Jewels, but yeah, 1 to 2 is pretty good in my opinion. The deck is kind of doing exactly what Tyler's list was doing, although the defensive line is a little bit different. I actually like the Lorites and the Girion. I think that's a really good choice. So congratulations to Dustins for getting into the top 8 here. Next up we have Dalton, another Michigan native. We are gonna just slightly change this because his list is very long, and the only Zeus list in the top 8. Actually, I think he was one of the only Zeus lists in the overall tournament, if I recall correctly. The deck is not doing anything too much different. You're going to notice the stone lineup is very different in that you don't get you do not get the 1 magic stone anymore. However, you do just have a ton of stones you get to play. The fact that you got for sea stones in this set was really helpful. Adiractus Memoria on the front side of Zeus is a 5-color Omni Stone, as well as Moonshade. Opting to do less pain stones makes a lot of sense to me. You want to have as high of a life total as possible. You don't want to be killing yourself by accident. One thing that is in here that I think is a little bit of an accident is he is running 4 Zeus enters the game of gods. He's not just he's not being that player. But you do get to add a couple of things to this deck, because even though you lose some cards like Mount Olympus, you can replace that with a Prototype. Prototype is really good in this particular build because you're able to order on turn 1 if you happen to draw it. Otherwise, it's just in a free upstart goblin for your turns later in the game. He opts to play Gil Lapis, which is basically Fire of Zeus, but on a body. I think that's totally fine. But the other card that he is playing, which I know is a very Dalton flavor, is Odin Enters the Game of Gods. It's essentially a Boruzuki but on a chant. And you can play it on your opponent's turn as well. It's also within color for Zeus. His primary color is white. So this card is always, relatively speaking, going to be live, depending on what your stones are. Being able to play this and just look for 3 more cards kind of gets around the fact that you don't have Olympus anymore. But the deck is still relatively potent. One thing you're going to have to recognize, though, is with more horns and Death Speaker Monk in the meta, this deck is going to have a little bit more counterplay to it, which I think is very healthy in general. Zeus was dominating pretty much all of last format, so being able to say, you know, we have some interaction with this deck now means we're going to be seeing a little bit less of it, but I still think it is a very solid deck, very good. If you are a good fundamental player of Force of Will, this deck will reward you for that. So it clearly rewarded Dalton. He stuck on it. He did a lot of reps with this deck, so it made sense for him to go into this tournament with Zeus. Congratulations, buddy, for getting into your 2nd top 8. This is the 2nd top 8 Dalton has gotten in the last couple of months, so he's on fire. He's on fire. Next up, we have Steven Holsheiser running another Machina list, right? This list is pretty standard from the stuff we saw in Magdeburg, although he's opting to play 4 of the Dark Alice Rabbit Princess and Alice's Fantastic Trick. This is a card that I did not see a lot of people playing in the top 4, including Brendan, who did not include this. Instead, he did some other things like he did Gradius instead of this card. This card is actually really fascinating to me. It hits any entity, so it's very flexible, and you get to proc it after you play your war horses, because war horses go on to the chase. They count as a card being played, and so Alice, the Fantastic Trick, sees that and is able to pop any card in the field. If you end up getting a 3rd card on the chase somehow, which is, you know, definitely possible in a deck with Prototype, this card is unchaseable, so your opponent can't do anything to stop it, which is also very very useful. Is it better than some of the stuff that Brendan was playing? I'm not entirely sure, but it is a very potent tool for this particular deck. Of course, he's playing Selective Decapitation and all the basic staples for this deck. This is a pretty, if you're looking for a net deck to take and to use in order to sort of practice, this is probably the deck that you want to net deck and maybe change a couple of cards here and there for your own play style. This is definitely the way to go. This is pretty standard. And Steven, a really good player, so the fact that he got top 8 with this is not a surprise to me at all. This deck is solid. I don't know what else to say. This is pretty much like Warhorse deck with Machina. So congratulations, Steven. Very good getting into the top 8. And then we have Ivan, who again is playing a very similar list. The sideboard is really, really different. And the one thing we need to talk about here is, even though he's playing Fantastic Trick and he's playing a suite of Lorites alongside his Feathsings and Ultra Magic Stone Golem, he opted to play Endless Starlight, the Star Sword. I would like to know if Ivan would replace this with Angelic Battle Barrier in the future, just knowing how potent that card is, and considering the decks that did include that in their list did really, really well in this tournament. I'm wondering if he would change that into the future. Otherwise, the Magic Stone of Nature's Beauty is not, in fact, a rune that you can put in your Magic Stone deck. It is the card that I believe produces natural white, and then you can filter twice for green. So Ivan's stone list, again, is very diverse in order for him to use Institute to the best of his ability. Other than that, guys, this has been the top 8 breakdown for GP Caseyville. Before we go, I just want to make a quick announcement that, you know, if you were really someone who was looking forward to Force of Will Festival, number 2 Electric Boogaloo here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and you hate Horus and you hate Origins, good news, we are going to be banning those cards for the tournament. We could have a custom ban list for this tournament alone. We are banning Origins and Warhorse, but we're going to be doing some side events. Bring these cards with you, though, because those side events may or may not include some of these cards. But for the main tournament, if you are looking to have some fun, if you do not like the current meta, we are going to shake it up. These cards are banned for Force of Will Festival. Link is down in the description down below. Check out those details. I'm really excited to see what the metagame looks like as we experiment with these cards being banned. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think down in the comment section down below about GP Caseyville. Is there things that are that you would change about the current metagame? Are there things you're looking forward to in the next set coming up? I'm just really curious to see what you guys thought of this tournament overall. Are you excited that Wolfgang 2 finally broke into the metagame? Let me know, because I'm huge. Were you sad Olivia wasn't there? I was. I really wish it was into the top 8, but I mean, I'm an Olivia stan, so we'll get around that. Anyway, guys, I'm waffling way too much, but let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and we'll see you next time for the next tournament report. See ya.